Welcome to the newest episode of Objectively Biased. We're finally back. This is Wilder Adams alongside John Tortorelli, and the NBA offseason is here. We'll just go straight to the point. John, how's life been since the pre-draft era?
The pre-draft era was exciting. And I'll tell you what, the draft left me with some surprises this year. It was a class that kind of shook out the way it was expected to, though, in the grand scheme of things. And I'm excited to talk about that. But today we're brought by day 3 of NBA free agency. We've had a lot of very interesting moves. It hasn't exactly been the way I expected it to play out. Some
Mm-hmm.
very surprising signings. Today we got some news of a couple of new acquisitions for some teams, but I feel like this NBA offseason has seen a lot of different teams kind of try to get their foot in the door. A
Yeah.
lot of different squads looking at this Pacers around the Eastern Conference. And I look at Boston, Indiana losing their top players this upcoming season, and they say to themselves, we can make a push much like Indiana did. So this is a time where a lot of teams are adding those kind of puzzle pieces to solve the entire riddle.
I'm not kidding when I say this. I think since the last time we recorded an episode, the entire landscape of the NBA has entirely changed. I mean, it's entirely changed. I don't think I've ever been so upset about an injury.
Mhm.
And I'm always upset about injuries, of course, but the Tyrese Halliburton injury was one of the most devastating that, I've ever watched. Game 7 of the finals, a finals team missing their star now all of next year. That was heartbreaking. And we just seen so many changes to the NBA since with free agency and the draft. And speaking of free agency, Mr. John Tortorelli and the Pick a Side crew representing at the Bleacher Report NBA free agency live show. They were the hosts of it, John. So, how does it feel to be famous?
It feels good as the fire siren in my town goes off in the background. It was a cool opportunity. Shout out to Bleacher Report for welcoming us. And like you said, we got to kind of cap off the final 3 hours of their 13-hour long free agency stream. So to me, it was a dream come true. I'm as happy as able to play out.
It's only the beginning for you guys, my friend. I mean, I've watched Pick a Side forever. They just do such incredible work, and you guys deserve every single opportunity you get. And I just know the more exposure you guys will receive, that the more people will be like, we can't let those guys go. So you guys deserve all of it. John, before we really get into the NBA draft content, I really want to give a little rant about the draft because it feels like every single year we get the media narratives, the hype about some massive trade that's about to happen. It's about to be the craziest night in NBA history. I mean, Shams literally said last week, don't sleep. Don't sleep, people. And nothing happens.
Yeah.
Nothing happens on draft night. No significant trades. The only trade that everybody's complaining about is the trade going up from 23 to 13. So, in other words, nothing happened. So, I'm going forward. I'm just prepared for disappointment when I hear people talk about the NBA draft and all these trades are happening. They're not happening. They're not happening. Okay, they're not happening. Everybody.
Everybody.
I wish it was different, but that's how I feel.
Everybody thought that the Nets are going to move up with their 5 first-round picks, and there's no way, as Riv and I talked about in our very late pre-draft mock, that there's no way the Nets are going to use all 5 of their first-round picks, right? I mean, they have to package some of them to at least trade up, or if not trade up, acquire a player that they think can become a star in Brooklyn, but no. And I felt like, much like you, there was a lot of build-up, a very extreme climax going up into that third pick where Philadelphia's on the clock, and then nothing happened afterwards. But even still, I felt like if you'd like to start there, the biggest hawk of the night to me felt like beyond Cooper Flag and Dylan Harper, Ace Bailey going to Utah number 5. Pre-draft doesn't work out for the Jazz. He was even asked in his post-draft interview if he expected to go to Utah, and he said, honestly, no, I didn't. And it really built the presence that the Jazz are taking a player who'll be disgruntled to be there. But when I look at Ace Bailey, Utah might be the very best destination for him. At face value, you stay in the top 5 of the draft. You don't fall very far, but you go to one of the best player development staffs in the entire NBA, and you go to a team that just developed Lauri Markkanen 2 years ago into an All-Star's first year at the team after in Chicago his growth stagnated, and at the Cavs he was a souped-up role player. He comes to Utah, and Will Hardy's offense, his skill set, which is similar to Ace Bailey, as a versatile shot-making power forward who can play both forward spots, and he has the length to be an impactful defensive player at the rim. And it feels like Ace Bailey is just a younger version of him if they do end up moving on from Laurie Markkinen at some point to kind of coop in the trade value that he built up. So when I look at Ace in Utah, I say to myself, the media may not fully appreciate it, but I like this land spot a lot.
I I don't think you can complain about it from a basketball perspective. It's just the mystery of the Ace Bailey draft stock continues to loom, right? Because
Mhm.
it felt like, all right, what are his intentions? And over time, it felt like his best interest was to go to a team where he wasn't threatened by anybody. And then it also felt like, does he want to go to an Eastern big market? What's going on there? Frankly, it does frustrate me. Well, I don't know if it frustrates me, but when I heard the reports about how Ace Bailey was disgruntled and didn't want to go, he didn't want to go to this team, didn't want to go to this team, it's so hard for me to get mad at kids anymore when I hear stuff like this because, John, as you and I are getting a little older in our 20s, right? It we understand how the 18-year-old mind works, and it gives me more just leeway for a kid like Ace Bailey because clearly this is an agency problem more so than an Ace Bailey problem. He's just a kid being told how to handle the process by adults he's supposed to trust, and now he's coming to the NBA on strike one. He's coming into the NBA with a target on his back, this reputation of having baggage, having an ego, not being a team player. And this is all exactly how his agency managed it. Even if he wanted to go to a different team, there was probably better ways than trying to push his way around and push teams around the way they did. And you also add to the fact that this agency had no ethos. I mean, it's not credentialed or officialized by the NBA. It makes him look worse. If Rich Paul is handling the draft process and he decides this is how they want to go about it, I think it'd be like, okay. Like, but the fact that this guy's non-official and Ace Bailey is taking this advice and it's really bipolar advice, polarizing advice, that's where it just gets really confusing. And I love it when young people decide, you know what, I'm going to try to control as much power I can to go to the right place because in succeeding in life, it's almost as much about getting into the right doors, meeting the right people as it is, just being great, and going to the right development program is incredibly crucial. That's why I worry just about this situation because I don't blame them for that, but the way they handle it with an agency that lacks credibility, that's the problem.
I think that's well said. At the end of the day, Omar Cooper, which is Sharif Cooper's dad, and the agency really made it seem as if you want to stay on the East Coast in one of those bigger markets like Washington or Brooklyn. At the end of the day, he gets drafted by the Jazz fifth overall, and all of that's a wash behind them. To me, I feel the pre-draft process becomes obsolete once you enter the NBA. And luckily, like you said, whether or not they accomplish their goal, whether or not they perceive this as the right land spot, I believe it is. So that's my biggest observation for the Jazz. They still have a little bit of an opening in their backcourt after letting go of Sexton, who they moved in a salary dump, and waiving Jordan Clarkson. But I really like Isaiah Collier and what he showed as a playmaker in year one to a point where I feel there's so much opportunity, especially with Ace having a starting role. I anticipate early on that the Jazz are going to kind of be a blank canvas, and there's going to be a lot of freedom given to Bailey, and that really did seem to be the crux of what he wanted most.
And at the end of the day, if he handles the rest of the situation smoothly, which by all accounts he has, he went to Utah. He had a pretty solid press conference, I thought. He hasn't really bashed Utah. He seems fairly optimistic over time. If he
Mhm.
just goes about this the right way and just shows up and acts like the young leader he wants to be, or just somebody who's not a liability, we're going to forget about this. Stephen Curry wanted to go to the Knicks. He didn't want to go to Minnesota. He didn't want to go to Golden State. He tried to force his way to New York, but do we remember that? No, we don't. So this could be something that gets blown under the rug right away. But even Steph Curry comes in without a target on his back because he had an official, representation handling that draft process. Ace Bailey's draft representation, by all accounts, wasn't the most professional, and the fact that it isn't an official recognized agency by the NBA makes it look even more silly. So, like I said, he's an 18-year-old kid. I could only imagine all the things that would get behind your ear at that age with that much pressure. So I'm not even that mad at Ace Bailey. I don't have that many red flags about his character. So if Utah fans are worried about Ace Bailey, I think unless his representation gets in the way or his brain kind of gets washed by the wrong people over time, I'm not that worried about Ace Bailey in Utah.
No, neither am I. I'm pretty optimistic. And it was funny. We had Ace going at pick number 3 to the 76ers, and
Which would have been a
that's
great
the
spot.
draft.
Which would have been that's the right spot for him. That's the
Definitely.
right
I,
spot.
I liked both. I liked both. And I felt the draft started with Philadelphia and what they decided to do at pick 3 because it was Daryl Moore's biggest, highest selection in his history as an exec. And we've seen him in the past hit on some pretty tough picks. Jared McCain, Tyrese Maxey, these have not been lottery selections, yet this level of young talent has given the Sixers multiple different timelines. They end up going with Baylor's guard, VJ Edgecombe at pick 3. To me, it was very fascinating because VJ is only 6'4" without shoes, 6'5" with, and the fit to me does make sense from a role standpoint. The criticism and the skepticism that I had pre-draft was if you could start two guards that are 6'2", and then your small forward is 6'4", and then really have enough length, versatility, and I guess you could say his tools because VJ is a elite athlete and he has good length. But
Mhm.
playing the small forward position, I wonder where your thoughts are on Edgecombe in Philadelphia. Are you more optimistic now that Daryl Morey gave him a stamp of confidence and really has him as that kind of missing piece in this core?
VG Edgecombe, I don't have kids yet, but I do kind of consider him my child because VJ Edgecombe, I just love him as a prospect. Like, I was just about to go on a rant about how much I would have wanted Ace Bailey to go to Philadelphia for his sake because the combination, like Tatum and Brown, going to a team where there's no pressure, but you're not that far away from being needed. I
Mhm.
feel the exact same way for VJ, but I think VJ is a better prospect. I thought VJ was the right guy there at number 3 overall because not only does he have the tools, I think people have overstated Ace Bailey's tools and understated VJ Edgecombe's tools. Like,
Mhm.
for example, VJ is 6'4" without shoes, and they kept trying to say he's like 6'2" when he's 6'4", which is Anthony Edwards' size about. And Ace Bailey being 6'10", when in reality he's more 6'10" in heels. So I mean, I thought VJ was a better prospect from physical tools than Ace. I think he's got an NBA skill. He can be that missing piece as a highly intense defensive minded player, but he's got so much upside as a shooter. He's an upside as an attacker. He comes off as somebody who's going to have an outlier development off the dribble. I just felt like VG Edgecombe outside of Cooper Flag was the safest bet to be an all-star, all-defensive, and all-NBA player. And I can see that in his future. So Philadelphia made the right pick.
They got the most explosive player in this draft to me, and they got one of the best defensive playmakers. It's fascinating because he can really thrive as a cutter and spot shooter with the amount of creation that they have, and especially if Embiid's healthy, then you really kind of have him early on as like a fifth starter, and then the burden on him to grow on the ball will be much less so. And then progressively, he can start to develop as a ball handler, and that's where I kind of draw the line with VJ having a very high floor and questioning what his ceiling will be. Can he be an all-star? And I look at him comparatively to say Con Canoopel, and those were the two prospects that had in this same range with Ace Bailey, 3 through 5 roughly. And I do wonder if Philadelphia will regret passing on Canoopel because of how much more complementary and scalable his skill set is as an elite shooter, a good ball handler, and someone that can really get into the teeth of a defense without being the best athlete. That being said, I'm going to default to Daryl Morey 9 times out of 10 when it comes to drafting guards. And it dates back to his tenure in Houston, taking Aaron Brooks with the 26th overall pick. This is somebody who has a very keen understanding as a scout. And the Edgecombe archetype itself, these defensive first, hyper athletic guards, in recent years, we've seen these manifest in the guys like Isaac Okoro. But at the same time, I feel that Edgecombe has more chops as an offensive creator. And I feel that given just how untapped his potential is in an athlete, I do look at him more in the mold of a Victor Oladipo. And it's just going to come back really to how much he improves as a ball handler and how much his three-point shooting can scale. And really that to me will decide whether or not he has an all-star type of ceiling. But in the meantime, for Philadelphia, you're not counting on that. And I feel if you're just getting a quality starter here at pick 3, that is a very good return on this investment of the third overall pick.
Did you listen to when he was drafted third overall in his like pre-draft interview right after?
Yeah, it was one of the coolest moments, and it kind of made me a big VJ fan. Anyone that has kind of worn their heart on their sleeve and their family, I mean, you saw the entire inside of the suit. It was everything that had led him up to this point. I think that story is one of the classic draft moments of a athlete immediately becoming a fan favorite.
He wasn't just hungry, bro. The MF was starving, like legitimately starving. And I just bet on players like that. I just do. And I've always thought he had it, just had it, but I know he has it. And like an Isaac Okoro, like I get why people get worried about that, but VJ was like one of the leading scorers on the Bahamas Olympic team at 18
Yeah.
with Heald and Aiton. I
Yep.
mean, averaging 15 points per game on Baylor as a guard, as a freshman, is not easy. And he had games he's shooting 7 for 9 from three. This is not just a raw offensive kid. This kid's got tools, and I think he's going to build on those tools. He has a better foundation than Butler and Oladipo and guys like that had at the same stage. Like he had a better he's at a better point than Kawhi was at that age. So I'm not saying he's going to be Kawhi, but I really love him as a player. I think he was a slam dunk selection.
I would agree. What was your favorite draft sleeper? 'Cause I feel like there's two prospects that I saw you talking about, and one of them was definitely a big riser in the first round. When you look at
Yang
the
Gang.
entire class,
Yang Gang. All right, so we'll start with you, Hansen Yang. And by the way, I don't want to sound like a jerk, but you're crazy if you think that Hansen Yang's a bad pick to anybody. Anybody. And not does it only start with the fact that he had first round talent, because at the end of the day, if you're going to ask me, are you going to bet on a really, really tall person with really long arms and skill, or a short person, less proven? I'll pick the really effing tall person. And Yang has the footwork, he has the playmaking, he's got the it. I mean, he's throwing self alley oops to himself in China. He has touch. I mean, he's got first round talent, but he is a gold mine. He's a gold mine. He's the first Chinese first round pick since 2007 with Yi Jilian, I think his name was. I think that's how you said it right. 6th overall to Milwaukee, and then Yao Ming in 2002. Those guys generated so much money. Obviously, he made like $1 billion for Houston, Yao Ming, but Yi also made a crap load of money in the NBA for NBA teams like Milwaukee. So if he doesn't work out and he makes your team hundreds of millions of dollars, it's still worth more than the 16th pick. But if he does work out, oh my gosh, like you literally have one of the 10 most marketable players in the NBA. And I'm not even overreacting. So he was a home run pick.
the Hansen Yang pick to me is a very intriguing one because he just turned 20 days after the draft. In the last two seasons in the CBA, he was averaging 15 points, 11 rebounds, and then this last season led the conference or led the league in blocks with 2.6 per game. And coming to the draft, a lot of people did not really scout him a whole lot because he wasn't really projected to be a first round pick. But anytime you can get a player at this level of size, the positive passing vision, because when you're that tall and you're able to see and survey the floor that well, just the ability to be a solid passer can really create a lot more advantages in the half court. And then also with that too, he's someone with a good post game and good footwork. So to me, it's an intriguing pick by Portland, unexpected one to many, but I'm excited to see how this plays out. Last year, we saw Zach Edey move up a little bit based off the pre-draft consensus, end up being productive for the Grizzlies. And in Yane's case, I feel the expectations of landing spot are quite good because the biggest question is how this athlete translates to the NBA level. And when you pair him up with guys like Denny, Tumani Kamara, and so many versatile defensive players to surround him with, it kind of alleviates the pressure for a drop back big. And at the same time, Portland does have a big hole now at the backup center spot after waiving DeAndre Ayton.
No, I think the big question here with Portland is going to be just how much do you trust Donovan Clingan? That's going to be something I'm going to watch out for because you just drafted a center 7th overall last year, and then now you draft you get rid of DeAndre Ayton, you bring in Hansen Yang. I still think Robert Williams is still on the roster unless I missed something big.
He's just always hurt.
Yeah, he's always hurt. So he's going to have an opportunity right away, but I just find it really strange. A team that I think wants to make the playoffs drafting back-to-back bigs in the first round 2 straight years. fairly high draft picks, that's going to be something to watch out for. But I think Yang has the upside, dude, to be legitimately. I think he's got all-star potential if he puts it all together. I really do. Just because you're not going to find many players that big with that touch, with that feel. And the question is, will he stay healthy? I kind of watch him. I always wonder, how is his body going to hold up? And also how he handles NBA speed when they get him in the open court. How does he situate with that? Those are going to be big questions. But if you ask me, do I think it was a good pick at 16? Yeah. What's the worst case? He makes you a lot of money. It doesn't work out.
Now, I felt like looking at the draft, it kind of was a precursor to an NBA free agency. And I want to shift the gears a little bit here to what we've seen through the first couple of days. I felt like moving into this all season for a team like the Pacers, coming off a finals appearance that, and this became the biggest news of day 2 of free agency, Myles Turner was set in stone to stay in Indiana moving forward for the future. And yesterday we saw the Bucks do something which we really haven't seen in recent years, and that was stretch the remaining salary of Damian Lillard, who's coming up torn Achilles, turns 35 next month, to sign Myles Turner and poach him from a division rival in Indiana. And when you look at the state of the Bucks, Giannis afterwards, reportedly by Mark Spears, was not happy whatsoever with the team kind of cutting and kicking Damian Lillard to the side of the curb just to replace Brook Lopez with a younger version of him. Turner was great this season. He's one of the most valuable archetypes and sought after bigs in the game. But when you look at a team like the Bucks, what do you make in this Eastern Conference? We have the Hawks taking a big step forward. You have the Magic acquiring Desmond Bane. You still have the Cavaliers and the Knicks. The Knicks today hired Mike Brown. This is to me a
Yep.
great hire for them. What do you make of this Milwaukee Buck team that in the draft they weren't able to use their own pick, and now they're trying to make this last ditch effort to keep Giannis happy by signing a player who's integral to a championship team?
I legit have no clue what Milwaukee can do, what they are doing. I think Myles Turner next to Giannis is a really fun idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, he's kind of a more athletic version of Brook Lopez, not quite the footwork and polish on the block, but similar idea next to Giannis, and he could be a better version that way. So I'm not mad about bringing Myles Turner on the surface, but they give up nothing for, or they give up a lot for Damian Lillard, and then he tears his Achilles after he plays through a really serious condition, which led to the Achilles tear, and then they stretch his contract. That's one, not a good look. And number two, now that Damian Lillard's gone, it's like, what is really the path in Milwaukee? What is the goal? What are they doing? If you're Giannis, are you just like the teenage girl who keeps hanging out with the a-hole boyfriend hoping he's going to change and they don't? Like, that's what the Milwaukee Bucks feel like right now. What path are they on? They don't have a direction, and it just feels like that team continues to linger. I like Turner. They're not a contender, and if they brought Damian Lillard back and they have Myles Turner, might be a different conversation, but they don't have Damian Lillard. I don't know where they're going. And on the Indiana side, real quick, I really understand why they let him go. I don't think they let him go if Tyrese Halliburton doesn't tear his Achilles. I think they were prepared to go in the second apron. And then when Myles Turner got that contract, they were like, look, we're not going to compete next year at the highest level without Halliburton and 1 year under the second apron, which in the modern second apron structure is kind of a bullet. Like, you have a couple bullets now. And once you have 3 CBA second apron years in a 5-year stretch, the minimal roster flexibility gets worse because your first round picks sink to the bottom of the first round. So I think Indiana just said, we like Turner. We don't like him enough to shoot one bullet for no reason next year. And here we are.
It's so tough for me to defend Indiana in this case, where I understand, of course, they would have added $26 million to their payroll. But when you look at the core of this team, with exception to Bennett Mathurin, who's going on last year of his rookie deal, there's really no players in the future you'd have to extend, which to me are more important than Turner. When you look at guys that were quality rim protectors and efficient floor spacing bigs last year, the list is so narrow that I understand. I do agree with you. If Halliburton was healthy after Game 7 finals, regardless of whether or not the Pacers win or lose, given the season they just had, they're more likely to keep Turner. But this isn't Boston offloading Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday to me. And this was a point made by many different people already. This is a Pacers ownership group that is not willing to do what it takes to maintain the core of a contender. And that is way more important when you look at how competitive this team is every single year. They're well coached. Indiana's very rarely a team at the top of the draft, which makes it so much more difficult to replace the archetype that you just lost in the front court. And you have two other bigs this year, two other Achilles, Isaiah Jackson, James Wiseman. This team doesn't have depth at the center position the way they do at power forward or in the wing department where you have a litany of different players. Obi Toppin, he's really a power forward, not a true full-time center. So I feel like Indiana here shot themselves in the foot. You lose a player that is just so rare to find in today's day and age. And for that, it really, to me, is a move that I can't defend. Even with the new CBA rules, they would not have been close to the second apron after extending Myles Turner for $27 million annually. They would have entered the first, that threshold roughly.
Oh,
But
they'll
you
be
can
first.
easily
Okay, then I
move
completely take back everything I said.
you can still shuffle around salaries and offload players, even if you do kind of touch over that first. I want to touch on the next free agent because I feel like Myles Turner was the best player on the market after the extensions of Kyrie, LeBron opted into his player option. The second best player to me was Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who Minnesota loses to an Atlanta team that's really gearing up to be a competitive playoff squad this year. It's different than Minnesota too, in the sense that once you get to Naz Reid, they couldn't. They had to pick and choose between him and Nickeil, where you really can't keep both of these homegrown players.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is a clear example of the new CBA structure
Sure.
kind of preventing these smaller markets like the Minnesota Timberwolves and even the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Ty Jerome case from keeping players who have developed into quality starters or guys that they found on the scrap heap. They didn't even draft Naz Reid. He was undrafted and he turns into a sixth man of the year and the best backup big in basketball. So that's where I
That's true.
differentiate the criticism. With Minnesota, it's understood. With the Pacers, it's really hard for me to defend it because they still would have had some kind of breathing room from the second apron. So that to me
I
is why
totally thought they were about to be on the second apron again. So I'll take the L on that. I'll give you
no
two.
words. But
No,
I want to ask you, Naz Reid's one of my favorite players in the NBA. I would have prioritized Nickeil Alexander-Walker over
no,
him.
no,
They didn't. They chose Naz
no.
Reid. You don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that at all.
Give me the case.
Who's the back line behind Naz Reid after Randall in the
You just
third?
drafted Ron Berenger with the 17th
Oh,
overall pick.
Jan Berger is going to be somebody who you hope is good in 2 years. I mean, you're rushing that kid into the rotation. I got Jalen Clark and Terrence Shannon waiting behind Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I mean, Terrence Shannon averaged 34 points per 36 in the conference finals. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying that's
I
who
like
he
both
is,
of them.
but I like both of them. Naz Reid still has another gear to his game, and you got him for 5 years, 125, and you bring Julius Randle back. I mean, now Minnesota has three really talented bigs who all are on tradable contracts. I that was the move. That was clearly the move to me. I love Nickeil. I think Minnesota did a great job helping Nickeil find his identity as a player, but I'm not losing Nickeil thinking we can't find that value again, as much as I like him. I think Atlanta is a big beneficiary of the CBA because now they let a team like Minnesota develop Nickeil, and now he makes them a team that can make the finals in the Eastern Conference. But also, Minnesota, I feel really good about Shannon and Clark behind him. So in that case, like I think it would have sucked to lose Nas's upside, and he goes to a team like Detroit, becomes their second best player on a 4 seed. That would have sucked. Nickeil's going to go on that team and be a really, really fun, like their Alex Caruso type. So good for Atlanta that way. But for Minnesota, it was a no-brainer. If you can keep Randall and Nas for under 34 million, that was a no-brainer to me. So
My criticism, it really stems from the rarity, and we talked about this return before in the archetype. To me, it really stems from what Nikhil's come into in the NBA, and this was somebody in the conference finals. Again, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander was your best matchup. And when you look at Jalen Clark, I like his game a lot. He shot 30% at UCLA in 3 years. Nickeil Alexander-Walker coming to the NBA was a much better shooter. And to get someone who's made 39% of his threes on good volume, I'm not going to criticize the move itself for extending Naz Reid. I like the contract. To me, it's more about just how important it is In the Western Conference, especially, there's so many perimeter stars that
Hmm.
have an abundance of perimeter stoppers.
I still
And
think they
that to
do.
me,
I still think
that,
they do. I
you
mean,
may argue that
they
with
do.
Jalen Clark and Anthony Edwards, and you have
Clark
Jaden McDaniels.
Clark gave Shea Gilgeous-Alexander problems in the regular season, unlike very few players, like problems. And I'm not saying like Clark is going to walk in and be better than Nikhil, but I just think if it's going to be an opportunity cost proposition,
Mhm.
you lose Nas Reed's talent and you have Berger, who I like a lot, but you're asking him to be something he's not ready to be. And then like you bring Nikhil back, and we're still kind of wondering, okay, what's another viable ball handler from Minnesota without having to give somebody 25 minutes, and then behind Nikhil, it's like, okay, we like Shannon, we like Clark. Clark, honestly, like I'm not walking in saying like he's going to come in and average 20, but his offense is better than I thought. I mean, he made his open threes, really smart cutter, could really defend, and Shannon looked great. Like those two both heavily exceeded expectations for me.
Right.
So, like, I have a back line behind those two, and I think Minnesota's proven they can develop a guy like Nikhil because Nikhil was on the verge of being out of the league before going to Minnesota. So
Mhm.
I look at it and I'm like, Nas Reed's the better talent, and I think it would have hurt more if Nas Reed goes somewhere and becomes a 19-7 guy, and then Nikhil becoming a really good six man in Atlanta. So like, I don't know. I respectfully disagree just because of what's behind Minnesota's farmhouse.
I get that there's more depth in the perimeter for Minnesota. I guess my final thought is that you can never have too much perimeter defense. Like we saw with Oklahoma City this year. It was great having Case and Wallace, but push come to shove in the finals, who was it? It was Alex Caruso. It was Jalen Williams, Lou Dort in and out. To me, that's what it kind of is required, I feel, in the Western Conference. But I really want to focus more on Atlanta's side of things for this move because there's no way you look at the Trae Young team that was the conference finals in 2021 and say that that is more playoff ready than this current Hawk team.
Yeah.
The Porzingis domino is going to affect everything. If he's healthy, that is a dream setup. If he's not, you have Onyeka Kanu, who's gotten incrementally better year by year. And at the same time, Jalen Johnson missed half of last season, but showed a lot of growth. Porzingis is the one that allows Johnson to really thrive in his role as a role man. And I feel that space element is something they definitely need in the front court. But then to have at the end of games a defensive lineup of Nikhil Alexander Walker, Zachary Risache, Dyson Daniels, Jalen Johnson, and then Porzingis or Onyeka, that's a luxury Trae Young's never had in his career in Atlanta. So now he is surrounded with high end to elite level defenders in Daniels' case at every position group. And Nikhil to me fits so perfectly into a system where he doesn't have to make decisions because Trae Young's the one orchestrating the offense.
Mhm.
So we were talking about Bleacher Report, and I gave the move a B plus grade, and I said it's fine if you give it an A. The more I think and I sit on this move, the value 4 years, $62 million. I see no way seeing why you can't say this can be an A level impact because it feels like to a lesser degree the Celtics getting Drew Holiday. Not as good of a player, but it's also not as large of a contract as Holiday. The Celtics were paying him. It's one of those moves where you're just stacking the deck on the perimeter and having a level of backcourt depth late in games, like I talked about at the Wolves, you can never have too much perimeter defense.
Mhm.
This Hawk team is just gearing up to me to not only win a playoff series, but if they do stay healthy, there's no way to me they can't make it to the conference finals this season. When you look at the Cavs and look at the Knicks, I see them as the third best team in the Eastern Conference. And that's with the Magic. I feel like they're in 3A, 3B between those two teams.
Dude, I swear when I say this, I think this is the best Atlanta team in the Trey era. I think this
Oh,
is
yeah.
better than the one that made the conference finals. And I think it reminds me a lot of when the Thunder got Caruso last year, where do they need him to start? No. Do they need him? Like need him? No, but it feels like you mentioned, a cherry on top to an identity that is a dream around Trey. Small, bad defender, transcendent passer who can be one of the most electric scorers in the league when he's feeling it. Surrounding that guy with literally 6'8", 6'9", 6'11", 7'3", and then off the bench, you have this rangy, do it all defensive guard off the bench with Onyeka Okongwu, one of the 5 or so best backup bigs in the league. That is I'm not kidding. That is literally the perfect formula. And then you get Luke Kennard, who Trae Young is going to feed, right? It's so good. I love this structure. I think this is the perfect roster around Trae Young. Just perfect. If you're trying to maximize him, this is the perfect cast of characters. And it's the theme of the Eastern Conference. Can somebody stay healthy? Because we've had 3 stars in the Eastern Conference tear the Achilles in the last 2 months, which stinks, but it's completely changed the landscape of the East. If this Hawks team is healthy and things synergize, Zachary Sachet takes a leap, Jalen Johnson proves he's the same player, KP looks healthy-ish, this team can make the finals. This team can make the finals. A lot of things have to go right, which I feel the way for every Eastern Conference team. Like, I personally like the Cavs more still. I like, and then it's really close between them, New York and Orlando. I think that 3 is still really close, but they're right there. And if things swing the right way, they could easily make the finals.
The only negative you can possibly have for this Atlanta all season is losing Karis LeVert, who I feel has become one of the most underrated guards in the NBA. That being said, you only had LeVert for part of last season. And the Kennard signing to me is critical because the other issue for the Hawks, it wasn't just a lack of 3-and-D players, but three-point shooting as a whole was a huge problem for this team. For as good as Dyson Daniels was defensively, that's his weak spot on the offensive side. Jalen Johnson, not a strong floor spacer at the 4. Gain a player like Luke Kennard in that 1-year, $11 million deal, it is a neutered version of Bogdanovich. He's going to come off the bench, hit north of 40% of his threes, give you a spark in those 15 to 20 minutes. Some of them will be with Trae, but more likely than not, in those all defense, mostly bench skewed lineups with Nikhil, maybe it's Ricochet and Onyeka. I love the fit of Luke Kennard in Atlanta, and I do wonder in the playoffs they're able to play him, but this team's focus is winning as many games, getting the best possible seed they can. And then I feel everything else playoff related, that's a question down the road with their 9th man off the bench. So this offseason for me gets an A for the Hawks. And really the only other thing they could do is bring back Larry Nance.
All the pressure's on Trae Young now. All the pressure is on Trae Young right now. And that's because Atlanta's built the team that we've all had the theory works with Trae Young. And if this team is healthy and Trae Young is still shooting 40% from the floor, and this team underachieves, his value is going to go so down in terms of his opportunity to get that big extension. I'm not really sure where that stands right now for him as a trade asset. Like, there's a lot on the line for Trae Young with his reputation, which already isn't good because he's already been snubbed multiple times in the All-Star game. But if he has a bad year and or the Hawks don't reach expectations, everybody's going to look at Trae Young because it's like, hey, bro, you have the lob big, you have the floor spacer, you have the number 1 pick floor spacing 3-and-D guy, you got athleticism, you got length, you have a defensive player of the year shooting guard next to you, an all defensive caliber player off the bench. If this team is healthy, what excuse does he have? He's got 0. It's literally built like the Rockets with James Harden. Instead, it's Trae Young. So I'm going to watch Trae Young very closely because this should be one of the 2 best teams in the East. If Trae Young is the guy that we thought he was going to be after year 2, granted, he's still great. He's one of the 5 best passers in the world. You can argue higher, but we're talking about winning a championship with a small guard, which is so ridiculously hard. But this is the time for him to prove he can be that.
Absolutely. The 2 biggest signs we covered, the last piece, the last domino, I guess you can say, of this offseason, which I guess it happened today. DeAndre Ayton doesn't sound like a domino, but the Lakers are counting on him to be one. They give him a 2-year, $14 million contract to become this team's new center alongside Luka. And it really was the best the Lakers could do given their limited financial resources. But kind of coinciding with these moves, the loss of Dorian Finney-Smith, who goes to a Houston team that is now even deeper, adds more shooting, more two-way play. It feels like a worst case scenario this all season for the Lakers. I get you signed Laravia. You could have done it either way. To lose a credible shooter like DFS, who is best playing off a player who can set him up like Luka, And then now you're depending on DeAndre Ayton when JJ Redick to me is a coach with a quick temper. I do
Mm.
wonder how he connects with DA if he's able to
Oh
get
my
the best of
gosh,
him.
that's going to be a
The
movie.
Lakers offseason to me, it's been one of the most polarizing ones. And unless this team's able to sign Al Horford, poaching him from the Celtics, I have a very challenging time seeing this team maximize Luka Doncic unless they trade Austin Reeves and LeBron James. Because otherwise, they don't have the trading chips to properly build out this team around him. And DA is a very good buy low candidate. I have a hard time, though, seeing this be the setting where he revitalizes his career.
I worry that this is this year's Phoenix Suns of 2024 to 2025. This Lakers team being as big of a disaster as the Suns last year. Because we saw the Suns, right? They had these big expectations. They go in the first round, they get humiliated by Minnesota. They come back next year. They look even more incomplete. They try to address it with young players, doesn't work out. And it turns out three one-way players who Beal's a little washed. KD and Booker are really good.
Feels not
Not-
close to washed.
Or washed for 33 point per game standard. He's a
Fair enough.
bad fit fourth option.
Okay.
Is that better?
I
Like,
think people disrespect him. He's still a very efficient player, but you're right.
yeah, he's more in the like Kenyon Martin phase or Kevin Martin phase than he is the prime Bradley Beal phase. That's a
Okay,
little
that's
better,
fair.
right? So this Lakers team, Luka's really good. He has a lot to prove this year. LeBron James is in his 40s, and there's already little rumblings like he's a little unhappy with the team right now. And then now you bring in DeAndre Ayton, bro, who I trust as much as the Hawk Tua girl selling crypto. So I don't trust DeAndre Ayton at all. He's come off his entire career going back to college, coming into the NBA as somebody who talented guy, loves to make the big word. He loves to make the big statements, the funny lines. But the moment you have to do work, he just comes off as the most insecure, just unfocused, uncertain player. And that's who he's been since he came into the NBA. That's who he was in Phoenix. That's especially who he was in Portland after he came up with a dominating line in his Portland Trailblazers press conference. And now I expect him to do any different with the pressure of LeBron, Luka, and JJ Redick. What evidence does DeAndre Ayton have that he can handle pressure? He couldn't handle pressure against Buffalo in March Madness. Okay, so I don't trust DeAndre Ayton at all. I don't trust him to put it together this year. If he does, great. I'm wrong. I'll give him credit. But it just feels like a team of does everybody's motives align once again? Is DeAndre Ayton actually here to come and make a winning impact? Or is he here because he's happy he got a second contract, like he said would be his success in the NBA as a number one overall pick? I don't trust Ayton. I love Luka. I love LeBron. But just where Luka's in his career, LeBron's in his career, they have no real 3-and-D player. I don't like this Lakers team.
I think that's well said. Is there any other move which stood out to you in the free agent cycle? Because to me, I felt like for the most part, they've been kind of under the radar moves. Your Karis LeVert's to Detroit. Maybe you have your Luke Cornett to the Spurs. I like that one. Or Gerson
Yeah.
Yabusele to the Knicks. Did anything else stand out to you?
I mean, your Nuggets, bro. Your Nuggets, my friend. I
Yeah.
mean, the Cam Johnson and MPJ deal was a sign and trade. My first read was, look, Cam Johnson's a little bit of a lateral move when you look at it on the surface, and they gave up a first, which isn't great. But when we talk about the CBA, saving money is like triple the value as it once was. And that brought in Bruce Brown, and now you guys trade Sarge for Valanciunas. I mean, you're a deeper team. We saw what Bruce Brown can do with Jokic. I'm kind of hoping you guys give Brown a decent contract this summer. And you guys have a core I trust much more than last year. And you guys gave OKC the biggest trouble, man. So I think you should feel like you're in the mix as much as anybody outside of OKC.
I'm very glad you talked about it because I wasn't going to be the one to start it off. But the Cam Johnson acquisition, I talked about in a video earlier today. I couldn't believe watching back the film, just the differences in how the two players operate with the ball in their hands. Cam Johnson is a very unselfish shooter that makes the right reads and can play out a pick and roll, and he isn't going to force errant shot attempts.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Porter Jr. is a incredibly good shooter, but on the second side of actions, when the ball comes to him and there's 8 seconds left in the shot clock, and he might have a passing window to deliver to Jokic or Aaron Gordon, he's not hitting that. With Cam Johnson, you saw him working with Ben Simmons and Daron Sharp in two-man games,
There's
and
playmaking there.
adding an extra layer in the Jordi Fernandez offense, which we saw him coaching Spain and being the Kings offensive coordinator. He then instilled those offensive principles into the Nets this season, which led to many different players having careers, Cam Johnson being among them. So going from that offense, which stylistically does have a lot of similarities with the Nuggets, I feel is a match made in heaven. And Cam Johnson, to me, kind of feels like the perfect role player to play off of Jokic. His ball
Yeah.
movement, his ability to play off the dribble or off the catch. And then defensively, he's kind of a wash. That's the best way I would describe it. Because Porter's definitely the better rebounder, and I think that's what they lose most this offseason. But beyond that, I feel if Cam Johnson's your fourth or fifth best defender in the lineup, you can get by. Other than that, the Tim Hardaway Jr. signing went under the radar for a
That was
lot
really good
of
too. Yeah.
people,
That's
but
a
I
big deal.
like getting another credible shooter off the bench. He's incredibly volatile, but we saw players there like Will Barton exceedingly inconsistent, but yet they still carved out nice roles with Jokic.
Mhm.
So having him and Strother as your backup guards or backup wings, and then I feel like the Jonas Valanciunas domino. It's maybe not domino, it's a stretch, but that's their best backup big they've had. And DeMarcus Cousins was their most credible option. But even then, there was a lot of different fights and disagreements going on in the locker room in that limited season in 2022. With
Yeah.
Valanciunas, you expect him to buy into his role, not have any turmoil within. And for that, I feel the Nuggets covered all their bases. So I
They
would
did
give,
as well as they could. I mean,
yeah,
the only thing you could tell me if I just completely missed something or they lose Russell Westbrook or not lose, but
they
Russell
replaced him with
Westbrook
Bruce
no
Brown.
longer on the team. You bring back Bruce Brown. Do they need to bring another point guard on the team, you think?
They have Jalen Pickett, who at times showed growth last season.
Yeah.
If they're bringing any point guard, ironically, I think it's Monte Morris, someone who can be a third guard, your 12th man. In a pinch in the regular season, he can give you spot minutes. But I would argue the answer is no, because Jalen
Okay.
Pickett showed enough growth last season to suggest he can be your third point guard. I do look at Bruce Brown as more of a combo, so to speak. But then again, when you have Jokic, the role of the point guard in the Nuggets is so fundamentally different than any other
Hmm.
team to where the position kind of does change in the responsibility. So I would argue no, but wouldn't be surprised if they make that move.
I mean, when you have Jokic as a point guard, I mean, you're
Yeah.
good, you know?
And Aaron Gordon
Yeah.
initiates.
I like you guys, honestly, right now, like way too early. I'm still kind of thinking how I feel about the West. And I was a little more down on Denver last year, as you know. I think right now they're my number two team in the West. I think they've done a really good job building around Jokic. And I just trust the ethos of a dominant Jokic with a, competent, set of planets around his galaxy. And then also just, I look at Houston a little bit. Obviously the KD trade, if we want to touch into that a little bit. Like
Okay.
Houston's really freaking good. And I love what they did in free agency. Just if there aren't like A+ guard options and you already have Fred, you're trying to integrate Reed and you have your number one scorer in KD now, just get as much length as possible. And they had the flexibility to bring back Adams, get Capella, get Dorian Finney-Smith, keep Jabari Smith, keep Tari Eason. Now that team is terrifying and they could end up being the best defense in the league next year. But I still am just going to trust the offense that Denver has around Jokic. And you know what? You can't count out Minnesota because people have done that for the last couple of years and we keep making the conference finals. So you
Right.
know what? We're still in the mix. But I think you
Definitely.
guys are number two right now. And then after that, Houston and Minnesota feel close to me in a too early prediction.
I would definitely agree with that. The Wolves to me are penciled as a top four team in the West. After that, you get into your Dallases of the world. But in the top three, to me, I feel most people are going to agree. For me, the Rockets are a 2B. The
Mm-hmm.
Nuggets are a 2A, that proven championship core, and Jokic as your one. And
Yeah.
then the Thunder, the defending champions, are going to be the top ranked team. The Rockets are an interesting case. I personally liked the Jabari Smith extension 5 for 122
Yeah.
because he's one of the few players in the NBA that can guard 1 through 5 and is, even if he's only making 35% of his threes, at 22 years old, you feel like the shot looks good enough and he's going to build more confidence to hit closer to 37, 38%.
Mm-hmm.
For that, I look at that archetype and giving him this contract now, which is 5 years, it's going to age rather well by the time he's 27 years old. The DFS signing was crazy to me because they needed a lot like the Hawks, We saw the Hawks stockpile on these defensive guards and these versatile wing defenders. But the Rockets were in a similar case where they added all these versatile defensive players, but didn't have the floor spacing. The Hawks go out and sign Kennard. Well, with the Rockets, you get a two-way player in DFS that kind of covers both bases.
Fact.
I do want to argue going from playing with Luka to Shepard, Van Vliet, and Durant, he's going to take a step back because he needs someone to kind of set him up off the ball. But even then with the Rockets, what separates them from the previous iterations of KD built teams, when he was in Brooklyn, they got swept by the Celtics in 2022, a year after his dominant playoff, the entire season, the first year off the torn Achilles. In that Nets core, they're playing three small guards, Kyrie, Seth Curry, Goran Dragic. They're playing slower, older players in the front court. They don't have any versatile defensive players with athleticism. Then you go to the Suns. You're playing three dominant on-ball options with very little 3-and-D players. Your only credible two-way player beyond those guys was Royce O'Neal. After that, you're banking on guys in the scrap heap. The difference between those teams, which offered a lot of spacing but no defensive integrity and personnel, was that this Rocket team actually provides what KD needs. KD
Facts.
doesn't need spacing the same way other stars do because he's one of, if not the greatest tough shot maker of all time. And because of his ability to hit in such tight spaces, to get off his shot attempts, to find his own spots in the right angles, he can be in an offense where it is a little bit more muddy, a little bit more static in the half court, especially when this is the best offensive rebounding team in the entire NBA. From the front court to the guys in the perimeter crashing the glass. What he needed were these players to stop the ball defensively, offer that kind of chaos, so then he can be the guy at the end of the fourth quarter who slows down the pace and gives you reliable offense. They simply didn't have that this season. So when you talk about the coaching, the culture is as good as it gets. I feel like Ime Udoka and KD working together again after their time together in Brooklyn is really a great fit. But I feel like the Rockets provide Durant what he's always lacked since Golden State. And for that, I believe this will be his most successful tenure since then. So I have a lot of optimism in this Rock team for that reason.
He hasn't been out of the first round since the first Trump turn. So I hope it's the best outcome for him because
Yeah.
if not, this is you leave Golden State, you go to Brooklyn, you go to Phoenix, and you go to Houston, and you still don't go out of the first round. He needs this, and they have the structure to get it done. I hope Reed Shepherd takes a big leap this year because I really believe in his talent. I worry again this year about the minutes for him. It's a really tough situation for him to get minutes. So I worry about that, but I really hope this is the year where he can kind of get a TJ McConnell type role on this team and kind of build up from there. That would be great. So I really like their structure. We'll see how the leadership on that team is. I trust Udoka. I think KD isn't a problem. I never thought KD was always the best at managing players or his emotions, but I never thought he was a problem. And I always thought he was a well-intentioned leader. So it's like two things could be true there. So we'll see how they put it all together this year. Ahmed Thompson, man, he's got the tools around him too. I like this Houston Rockets team. And as you mentioned, Kevin Durant, like, just keep the game simple. It's about a bucket for him. And they just have maybe the best nucleus, them in Oklahoma City, of just gritty, long athletes. And I think we saw how advantageous that was for OKC last year and this year. And then I really like this Rockets team. I think they're right there with anybody as well. So, no, I totally agree.
That's going to be the wrap of the Western Conference side of things. But before we get out of here, I want to talk about something really quickly, which it's probably the oddest situation in the NBA, not because this team's stuck entirely in purgatory, but Masai Ujiri earlier last week mutually parted ways with the Raptors. And I felt the last 3 years after their championship team built from 2019 to 2020, 2021, roughly, the Raptors have been the model example, along with the Bulls, because Chicago is exhibit B of this, of how to not manage your assets. At the 2021 trade deadline, this team had an option to trade Kyle Lowry to the 76ers for Tyrese Maxey as a rookie and Matisse Thybulle or a pick. They declined that and then thought they'd get a better offer in the summer. What they got was Goran Dragic, who never wanted to play with the team, and Precious Achiuwa. The team later waited to move Fred VanVleet until he had 1 year left in his deal, and then he walked for nothing when the Rockets gave him a monstrous 3-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
Then, most recently, a year ago, right before the new year in 2024, they trade OG Anunoby for RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. And before letting these guys actually play with their core, see how they fit, see what the ceiling is for that team, they do something that I don't think any of the other 29 teams would have done, especially the Knicks. That was give Emmanuel quickly $35 million, which is a lot of money, except they didn't do that over a couple of years, which would have been fine. Like Fred VanVleet, 3 years, 100 million. Okay. They
Or
gave him that money over
170,
5
right?
seasons.
5 170.
5 175 for a guy that on more teams than not is a six man. And then this year they were like, you know what? We have more money to spend. Why not get Brandon Ingram and then thrust him into this group, even though we've hardly seen them play together. And when I look at this Raptors core, you have Scotty Barnes, got the designated rookie max. This is someone that is kind of a focal point for your franchise.
Yeah.
We've hardly seen him play with RJ Barrett or Brandon Ingram, and yet you're paying Brandon Ingram $40 million. Still one of the most underrated players in the NBA. I don't even want to disrespect BI, but the decision to add him into this core when you hadn't even seen the existing group play together, to me was a sign that Masai Ujiri really had no vision with his team on his way out. And when you look at this Raptor team now, I feel like this team has been left in the bind because you have young talent like Grady Dick, Oj Abaji, and Colin Murray Boyles, who are going to have. I know Colin Murray Boyles is a rookie, so they have 3 years before this time comes. But guys like Dick and Abaji, sooner rather than later, you're going to have the opportunity to give these guys extensions. But because of the fact you've committed over $160 million to your starting lineup, 170 for a 31 team, you're not going to have the affordability to extend half of these young players that you've been drafting. And for that, I look at really the Masai Ujiri exit in Toronto, and I think that despite building a championship team, he left this franchise in a bad spot, and now they're kind of paying the consequences of really just poor foresight. And that for me is my biggest takeaway on how things ended, and it kind of is really disappointing.
The Toronto Raptors have joined the Chicago Bulls and the Sacramento Kings in the Bermuda Triangle. I have no idea what they're doing. Those three teams. You can argue about 27 teams, whether you agree or disagree. You kind of see the vision at some extent. Like
Yeah.
even the Hornets, we know they're trying to finally put their core together. You're trying to see like the Pistons a couple years ago, maybe a disaster a couple years ago. You see what they're trying to do. Those three teams right there, I don't know what they're trying to do. Like even Chicago, I think they're worse in Chicago now because Chicago is convincing themselves that Montes Bazelis is their franchise player. We'll see if that's true or not, but at least they have an idea of something. The
Yeah.
Toronto Raptors, it's just like I don't know. Have you seen like those people and it's like you look at their dating history and everybody they date's the same. They just look the same. Like look at the Raptors what they draft. They draft Scotty Barnes, they draft Colin Murray Boyles, they draft Mbagbu Jonathan Magbu
Magbo.
Magabo in the second round last year, just like these long arm, can't really shoot, kind of versatile, kind of fun. And then instead of like surrounding these guys with, shooting and size, which is what you do with that archetype, you just get more Scotty Barnes players on the same team. Or if you want to make a little difference, is bring in RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram, and they don't know what to do either. They don't shoot threes. They're the Bermuda Triangle, bro, of the Eastern Conference now. They're worse than the Chicago Bulls in that case now. And it's confusing because Masai Ujiri, he's had the reputation as one of the best GMs in the league in the past. And at some point you have to stack samples. And this Raptors team is just, you know, they haven't like put these pieces together. It's like when you make a dinner and you want steak and you want mac and cheese and mashed potatoes. Masai Ujiri spent $2,000 on mashed potatoes, and I don't know what to think about this. So I just think they're the most lost team in the Eastern Conference, and it's warranted why both sides decided to part ways.
Yeah, it's truly puzzling. Do you have anything else you'd like to add on before we get out of here?
Yeah, I just would like to say that, I still believe that I believe the Eastern Conference, even though it's really heartbreaking that we've had all these injuries. I hope that eventually this leads to, I think, a movement that we need to really get into the NBA. And I don't know if they will. I hold hope, but we need to be really careful, like the league protocol over Achilles injuries. Like if you have a calf strain, I don't care if you think you're healthy, you're out another week. Similar to how like concussion protocol, when you have a concussion, the league still has to be involved in the process beyond the team before final approval. I think you need the same thing with calf strains because these stars, I don't think it's an 82 game problem personally. I really
Mm,
don't. But I think it's more of just body management during 82 games.
right.
And like Adam Silver blaming it on kids playing AAU more when they're young. I mean,
He's
I
got a point. That's part
he's
of it to
got a
me.
point, but like historically, like these players, one, were playing like in tennis shoes 50 years ago. And I still believe that even if they play a lot of AAU, and there's some truth, a lot of truth to the idea that if you play multiple sports, you're likely to be just a more well-rounded, flexible athlete, which will minimize injury opportunity.
Hmm.
I don't think this is something that the league should just eliminate accountability for because
Yeah.
of how people want to develop for your own league. You need
Hmm.
your own protocols within your system. Tyrese Halliburton shouldn't have played in Game 5 of the finals. Kevin Durant shouldn't have rushed his injury in 2019.
Yeah.
Damian Lillard shouldn't have rushed his injury this postseason. Jason Tatum, we don't really know what was going on there,
There were
but like,
reports that he was saying he had pain before, him and
so
Tyrese.
we just need to be way less reckless about calf injuries than we've been. And it really breaks my heart because the NBA trying to figure out its identity in the post LeBron and Steph era, having all of your young stars have Achilles injuries is not going to help that. And now, like, we're talking about the Hawks and Magic in the conference finals next year. I mean, it's just we can blame other things. It's really convenient to do that. I don't think you could argue, sure, playing 68 games is better than 82, but at the end of the day, I think we need to be more specific on how we handle calf strains. So I think that's my last rant.
You're right about that to an extent. I think all the blame it can be attributed in all the places people have laid out. There is something to AAU basketball not having an all season for these players, and they come to the NBA, and I think Lonzo Ball, Zion Williamson, they're good examples of this playing basketball 10 to 18 nonstop. They come to the NBA way more mileage. But
Yeah.
the takeaway that I appreciate most was Sam Presti's observation, which I'll put a clip in now. It highlights how so often we have this impression built that it's the overall accumulation of these lower body injuries. It's largely a byproduct of how much the game's changed, how much more athletic and explosive these athletes are, how much more stress they put on their lower bodies.
Yeah.
You're to compare a game from 2014 where go to the foot finals, it's LeBron drive back in the post. You got three guys all staying there, and one of them's waiting to cut into the paint. There's way less movement. There's way less explosive, kind of quick, sudden movements. Like Tyrese Halliburton, his injury was a negative step. There's a lot less of what went into back then. There's so much. The game was so much simpler. I think that's really what it comes down to. That now it's like one game in the NBA. It's more so like multiple back then, and so it kind of exacerbates the stress in these 82 games. So there's definitely a give and a take, and I feel that the NBA should do a better job promoting in the regular season more rest in the second half because they condense the games after the in-season tournament. They get to 82, and then you've got all these back-to-backs. You got 5 to 10, and that's what leads to guys in the playoffs not being really they're putting their body at risk. So I think that the NBA holds blame, and same time so is the youth system, but hard to really place it on one spot.
I think at the end of the day, we always have to adapt to new systems. And I'm thinking out loud right now. And yeah, a lot of these kids are doing AAU now. And like I said, sometimes one dimensional athletes, we've seen a little bit, they can have issues like this. But at the end of the day, I don't want those reasons to be, justified reasons to avoid accountability. The
Mhm.
NBA can fix its own structure. Be careful with calf strain injuries. Just be careful with them. If a player needs to be out an extra week, just to make sure, have them out an extra week. That's better than cutting down games business wise to 72 or 68 or having a Jason Tatum out for an entire year for an Achilles injury. Maybe stop having the All-Star game in the middle of February. I've always hated that. Nobody likes being in Utah in February. Nobody likes being in Indiana in February. It's nonsense anyway. It should be in the summer. Every player should get a week off. Role players who are playing 12 minutes a game get an entire week off, but stars who get 40 minutes have to go through an entire all-star break process. And even if you're not playing as much in that process, that's still stressful and you're still on the court. It's just, there's a lot of layers to this issue, but I do think there's a lot that the NBA can do to really buckle down on this, because at the end of the day, we're pushing our players too hard. We are. And I think we have the resources to make that change. I don't think the opportunity cost, and I could be wrong, I didn't make the business analysis of this, but I'm not sure it's the end of the world if you move the All-Star game from February. Like, there's little things you can do to protect your stars, and I think the NBA needs to do that before they add more elements like a play-in tournament.
It's well said.
So that is going to do it for this episode of Objectively Biased. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back as soon as possible. River will be back soon. It's fun. We haven't been in the same room in a while, so I'm excited to see all of your amazing faces, hopefully at the Summer League as well in the near future. We'll all be there for the Summer League, so stay tuned for content, not only on Objectively Biased, but what John and Riv do for Pick a Side. I also have a new show called Wilder Wolves where I'm covering the Timberwolves full-time going forward. So definitely, if you want to join the wave, I'll be super happy for anybody to subscribe. That would be incredible. And yeah, just thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.